Welcome to a special offering by Conversations with a Wounded Healer, the Burnt Out Practice Owner. This series will discuss the current state of group practice ownership, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll hear current and former practice owners' tales of glory and woe as we attempt to answer the ultimate question, why do we do this to ourselves? And we want to hear from you too. What have been your biggest moments of struggle or triumph? What are questions you want us to explore? I'm your host, Sarah Bueno. I owned and operated my practice, Head Heart Therapy, for 10 years before selling in 2023. Ownership was an equally grueling and rewarding experience for me, and I now spend my time helping current practice owners find balance for themselves. Join us between releases of Conversations with a Wounded Healer for this special series. Welcome to the Burnt Out Practice Owner. I have good news and I have bad news. Which do you want to hear first? Good news? Bad news? Okay, bad news. Bad news first, because we always want to end on a high note. The bad news first is this is the last interview podcast of Burnt Out Practice Owner. And I saved this one for last because David is a lovely friend of mine who, if you listen to David Clinton's episode of Conversations with a Wounded Healer many, many moons ago, you will remember him and like him fondly. And in this episode, we talk about practice ownership and when you don't want to do it anymore. So this is going to be the last interview episode. I will do one more episode that is about what employees seem to be going through right now. So I reached out and did a survey of Chicagoland therapists who are working in group practices, and I got a lot of really interesting information that I want to share. And that is going to be the final episode. And in that episode, I'll tell you more of the details of what's happening next. The special series has to come to an end, not because I don't want to have these conversations anymore, but there's going to be a new forum and a new format for which we have these conversations. So stay tuned for exciting news. Hint that is not going to make any sense to you until you actually see what it is. There's a unicorn involved. So get really excited. Keep coming back. I'll tell you more in the next episode. Before we get to David, I do still want to hear from you. Even though we're not going to do the Burnt Out Practice Owner forever, I got some shit up my sleeve and I got things to talk about. So I want to hear what you want to hear. It's really, really important for me to get feedback so that I can provide the service that you are looking for. So reach out on Instagram at headheartbiztherapy or my email at sarah@headheartbiztherapy.com. To help moi out, you can also rate and review the podcast by going to ratethispodcast.com/woundedhealer. You can listen to Conversations with a Wounded Healer. If you've only been here for the Burnt Out Practice Owner, you know what? There's some juicy shit in Conversations with a Wounded Healer. And Burnt Out Practice Owner might not be around forever, but Conversations with a Wounded Healer will be. And I hope you'd be willing to share that with a friend. Another way to help me out is if you're a practice owner, you can hire me. I want to work with you. I actually want to work with your whole practice. There's a lot of stuff going on right now between employees and employers. And I think I've got some stuff that can really help smooth the road and make things a little less bumpy. So that's my invitation. Now let's talk about David. So David and I, if you go back to the Conversations with a Wounded Healer episode, you'll hear our history, but we went to high school together. He was a couple years older than me, and so we didn't know each other very well, and he went by a different name, and then lo and behold, one day we're Facebook friends, and he's like, I'm a therapist in the suburbs of Chicago, right? And I was like, get the fuck out! So it was super cool to reconnect and to get to know each other as adults. And one of the things he and I bonded over at the time was that we were both practice owners. And so we talked about all the good, bad, and the ugly stuff that came with that. And we have both since sold our practices. Well, David got bought out by his partner, but we have both since left the group practice ownership sphere. And so we talk a lot about that process. So I hope you enjoy this final interview of the Burnt Out Practice Owner. So David Clinton, him, is a licensed clinical counselor who has worked in private practice for over 20 years in the western suburbs outside of Chicago. During that time, he served as a clinician, supervisor, and group practice owner David is much more interesting than his bio would let you think. And I'm going to say this out loud because he's my friend and I can tease him for his boring as shit bio. But I trust that you will love this conversation with David. So please enjoy David Clinton. Are you a therapist stepping into a leadership role for the first time? Or maybe you've been in a leadership position for a while, but you're bumping up against new struggles. It's a transformative journey and one that can be deeply rewarding, but also filled with unique challenges. Many therapists find themselves in leadership positions because of their exceptional therapeutic skills. Yet leading, supervising, or managing others requires a whole new set of competencies not typically covered in graduate school. Our Authentic Leaders group is here to help you become the authentic and wholehearted leader you aspire to be. We believe that the journey is best undertaken with the guidance of experienced mentors alongside fellow learners. The next cohort of Authentic Leaders will run November 2024 through June 2025, meeting once monthly on Fridays for 90 minutes. We'll also have some additional opportunities for connection and support along the way. Join me in this journey of self-discovery and leadership mastery, where you'll enhance your leadership skills and forge meaningful connections with fellow therapists committed to their own growth and the betterment of the therapy field. www.headheartbiztherapy.com/authentic-leaders-group. David!
Hey, Sarah.
Welcome to the Burnt Out Practice Owner.
Yes. Good to be back.
Yes. Yeah. So we can tell audiences we tried to do this before and there was just a weird lag. So it felt like disconnected and you were like, let's just do it again. And so I was I'm so angry about spending more time with you.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the do-over. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, tell folks about you. Who are you? What you're doing in the world?
Sure. My name is David Clinton and I am a therapist. I've been in practice for about 21 years now.
Wow.
For about a decade, I worked at a big group practice in the western suburbs. And then after that, ended up starting a group practice of my own with a good friend of mine. And did that for about 5 years and then decided to stop doing that. And I've been ever since. Yeah.
Yes, and we will talk a lot about that. And just for folks who are also fans of Conversations with a Wounded Healer, you were on an episode of that right at the very beginning.
Yes, yeah, a number of years ago, and I still have clients who occasionally bring that up or people will reference it where they somehow found that. And
that's so cool.
It's been nothing but positive feedback, on that. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And if you haven't listened to that episode, David and I actually went to high school together, technically. But when did you graduate again?
94. So I was a few years, I think you might have been the same year as my sister.
Yes, right.
Amy.
So I was a sophomore when you were a senior, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Right. So we did go to the same school because our schools were weird that we had a separate freshman school, but then high school was sophomore. Right. It's a thing, but yeah. Okay. Now that everybody's caught up, so let's talk about you. Well, I know this is a challenging subject, right? We're not throwing anybody under the bus, but there are challenges to going into a partnership, right? So what do you want to share about your group practice experience?
I'd say there's challenges in going into group practice, period. Like it should come with a warning. There should be some sort of warning label issue.
I try. They don't listen. They don't listen. Everybody thinks they can do it better.
I think warning in particular for people, well, I'd say for myself, in the big 5 factor of personality, that being relatively high on conscientiousness, this sort of rule following, goal oriented, detail oriented, that quality I think is very useful if you're going to be a group practice owner. And that was not on the menu, not on my menu. It's just a personality trait. So I think some of the struggles I had with that was just needing to get up to speed on a lot of detail things. As a partnership, you sort of learn a lot. It's a lot like a marriage in a number of ways. And, when you're friends with someone and then, just money and details and all this other things come into it, it changes things. And it is an adjustment. Esther Perel has a really great podcast called How Was Work? And
Mm.
it's a lot about business partnerships. And for
Oh.
that did not exist when I had started, but it's a great resource if anybody out there is looking to do that. I would highly recommend it just as a resource.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
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 Well, and because I did a quick foray trying to open an IOP and had a business partner that I was supposed to be doing that with. And I remember my lawyer at the time saying, you have to go into it thinking about what the exit will look like, not
Yeah.
because we're predicting
Yeah.
that things are going to fall apart, but plans change, businesses shift, people do other things, right?
Yeah. And I've since learned, I think a lot of businesses do struggle that start out as partnerships. I think that is not an uncommon
Yeah.
plot line for that. And there was a lot of good in it. I think there were very strong reasons for doing it. And I sort of stand by those. I think there was, yeah, I think that's just the marriage components of that, like the issues that come up with that ended up being one of the reasons I decided to do it. But I think also a lot of it was just for myself. I think with therapy and I think just work in general, secretly, I've always wanted it to be kind of fun. And I feel like I try to bring a degree of fun to my work and juggling the different roles
Mm-hmm.
required for group practice. I think it over the 5-year piece, I think the level of stress for myself made it hard. Like it wasn't fun. It just was not fun anymore.
And let's be more explicit about that, right?
Sure.
Because it's kind of
Yeah.
like one of those things where like marriage is hard. People say that, but what does that actually mean, right?
Right.
So group
Yeah.
practice ownership was not fun. What does that mean?
Right. That's it. That's a great tagline for
Right?
that delivery.
We're really
So
selling it here.
okay, I'm gonna switch metaphors here. I would say group practice was a lot like the adjustment to parenthood for me,
Yes.
and that parenthood did not feel like I thought it was going to feel. And group practice ownership did not feel like I thought it was going to feel, in that doing it well is actually, it's about learning to live with a kind of tension
Yes.
and existing with this sort of middle space, this tension. So when you become, for me, when I became a dad, there's this, you feel this tension between work and home life. And from my vantage point, if you're going to be a good dad, you can't be all in at work. You can't be lopsided.
Yeah.
But you also can't be all in at home either and be neglecting your professional life. Like, and so it's learning to navigate this. I kind of don't feel like I'm doing anything real well. And that is the feeling that you're probably actually a good parent, if you feel like you're kind of not doing anything amazing, especially in those early years. And I think the tension with being a practice owner, there's a lot of them. I think one of them is between the roles of being, in some ways, when you're a leader, I think there are ways I felt like I am a servant. I am a servant of this business. I am a servant in some ways of my employees. And I'd say the opposite tension you have to hold is you also have to be, you need some hubris and you need some boldness of an entrepreneur. And those are very different muscles. And if you lean more towards one too much and away from the other, it's a problem. And I struggled with that. The servant role, like that comes pretty naturally to me, temperament wise, personality wise, tend to skew much more relational. I think the boldness, the entrepreneur, I think looking ahead, planning, vision, willingness to change as needed, it is a muscle. Yeah. And so I think from this vantage point, it's like, being a practice owner, you sort of need to do both, and you may not feel like you're doing either amazingly. And that probably means you're doing it. I don't know if you agree with that at all, or if that's.
Well, I agree with the different muscles. I don't know that it's as easy as like if you're aware of the tension, you're doing it right. But I think the added thing that is different since you left practice ownership is the expectations from employees are a lot more demonstrative now. There's a lot more dissatisfaction. I think a lot of it misplaced onto practice owners, but I also think that there's probably something that practice owners might not be hearing if everybody is saying it. It feels to me kind of like this balance of like the world is burning. So the expectations of what the workplace should fill in the gap for feels skewed to me. And yet, how can practice owners show up in a way that is going to be at least some sort of soothing balm on this gaping wound that we all have in America?
Yes. Do you feel like it got worse with COVID, like the
Yes.
2020? Okay. So I
Yeah.
exited
Yeah.
just as the pandemic was hitting.
Yeah.
Amazing timing on my part.
Yeah.
Yeah, I may have tweaked the timeline a little bit had I know what we were in for. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's changed quite a bit. That sounds like.
Yeah, it feels that way. I mean, are you hearing that from your friends who are still running practices?
I haven't heard a lot about it, but I'd say my friends at practices, they tend to be smaller, more
Mhm.
established. They're not working with brand new clinicians as much.
Mhm.
So I don't feel like I have my finger on the pulse of that world. And a number of years ago, I really pulled back on any kind of social media or the online forum. So I don't feel like I have my finger on the pulse that way
Yeah.
either. I just felt like a lot of what I was encountering was like group therapy going off the rails, where just a lot of poor
Mhm.
boundaries and a lot of drama. So I kind of pulled back from that. So
I mean, you're right. Like, I think social media is a part of it, and I lament this with my therapist all the time. Like, how
mhm,
do I stay abreast of what's happening in the therapist culture and yet not drive myself fucking bananas with the bullshittery? Like, literally last night, I
yeah,
saw on a Facebook group somebody complaining about one of my friends' practices and just being totally disparaging. And so I like went in, I took a screenshot because I'm like, I'm definitely showing my friend's practice. And I just went in there. I'm like, hey, these people are my friends. Just so
yeah,
you know, like XYZ, what you're saying is not correct.
yeah,
And then they took the post down. But like, what are therapists doing when they think this is how we resolve challenges is by venting to strangers who happen to be friends with the people I'm complaining about on social media? I want us to be better than that.
yes, absolutely. I am not cut out for that. I think that world. I feel like I still 21 years in. I love being a therapist. I love the clinical work. And I think probably the solo practice, the tech side, the social media side, I feel like for me personally, it feels like I have to cosplay
Mhm.
something other than who I
Mhm.
actually am. And I think
Mhm.
there's something simpler about the solo practice that it feels like it allows for more just authenticity.
Right.
Like I'm not trying to seem like something I'm not in that way. And navigating like the online stuff. Yeah.
Well, now that you're saying it, it's just making me think like I am the person for whom social media is built, right? Like I am an extrovert, I am a showman, right? Like
You're
I'm an entertainer.
phenomenal at it. You're
Thank you.
phenomenal. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I resent the expectation, especially like if we think about practice owners and how much marketing you have to do. You've got to make sure
Yeah.
you have a brand and that it's recognizable and that people know you and all this stuff. Like that talk about like not being able to fit into that mold that's being asked of you. Like right now I'm kind of wrestling with the tension of I know exactly the way I'm supposed to market, the way I'm
Yeah.
supposed to do things, and I fucking refuse to do that because it feels inauthentic and soulless to me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to send you an email with a tagline that's supposed to draw you into my email. No, if you want to fucking read my email, you open up my fucking email. Like
Yeah.
I'm not trying to manipulate you, and the marketing part of that is what like and so many group practice owners I see think that they're supposed to be doing it like that, and they
Yeah.
spend so much time judging themselves for not doing it that way, where that's taking a lot of energy away from the good work that they actually are doing.
Do you think there's any chance there will be a post branding phase for the work where it's like we just, or is this is
I don't know. I
the
mean,
way it is and the way it will go?
you would
Or,
think that there would be some sort of like rubber band backlash. I don't know what
yeah.
that will look like though, but
Yeah.
it's just so funny to me that in a world that is starving for authenticity, we continue to create the space that demands posturing.
Yes. Yes. There is a contradiction based in it, particularly for our work, because so much of the work it is supposed to be about authenticity and this sort of sense that, oh, I need to be telling a story with all the details of my sort of marketing campaign, sort of painting this picture of what is possible
Right.
or where we're going to help you get to. And I don't know, it just doesn't, I feel like in some ways clinical psychology has done an overreach and is
Yeah.
like kind of overselling. And for me, the work, again, I may be a museum piece. I probably am a museum piece in this. I feel like the work is, there's a humility baked into it. And we're supposed to be a container for people to sort of be with them as and a sounding board to help them sort through what it is they're looking to sort through. And I feel like there's this sense we're supposed to make it sexy or trendy, or
Right.
for me, things that are sacred, which I don't use
Yes.
that word a lot, but the work for me
Yeah.
feels sacred. I don't think sacred's supposed to be cool or sexy or
Well, I think it is, but it just is inherently and not in a slick way, right?
right. Yeah, but not in a slick way because I don't know. I thought most of the idealist in me, I thought it'd been beaten out of me by this point, but maybe there is still a bit where I hold out this
Yeah.
hope that there's still people that just, yeah, where we don't have to, I don't know, as I'm saying it, there is a bit of fantasy in that.
But what's wrong with
Yeah,
continuing to have hope, right? Because
yeah,
if we all lose our hope, we are gonna
yeah.
become this, like, dystopian nightmare. We have to have hope.
Yes. The phrase stubborn hope. I really like the phrase stubborn hope. And
Ooh.
there is a stubborn hope I think I hold on to. And really, even as a group practice, I mean, I jumped into the branding stuff. Actually, it was fun to learn about. There's a creative challenge actually that was fun and it used a different part of my brain.
Mhm.
I think since being solo, I have been much more like I don't really have any social media. I'm hard to find. And really, it's word of
On
mouth
purpose.
on purpose. And if you find your way to me, it's usually you've been referred by somebody who thinks we'd be a good fit. And it's quiet. And
Yeah.
there's things I really like about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're just making me think, like, group practice ownership is anything but quiet. And
Yes.
as we're sort of talking about, like, the expectations of a social media marketing world, having a business in that space, like, the people that I wanna work with as a consultant are holding their practice as sacred, not in a
Yes.
precious way, but in a profound way,
Yeah.
but without being too precious.
Yeah.
And, I think the way I have always marketed myself is it's not about, like, okay, I want to make X amount of money. And so I'm going to, like, do all these things in order to make money. It's like,
Yeah.
I do all these things because they fill my soul and I happen to make money doing these things that feel really aligned.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's what I want for practice owners. And I think because of the expectation, because of the pressure, because of our, the way that our capitalist society is sort of shaped, it's really hard to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the best therapists I know didn't go into this field to get rich primarily. Like you need to make a living. And I think it's good to be unapologetic about that.
Yep.
You have to.
And you can make a decent amount of
Yeah.
money.
Yeah. And ways, I think the motivation to want to build a thriving group practice that I think when I was doing it that I tapped into is you can help more people if you do
Yes.
this well.
Yes.
And if you provide supervision and a context and
Yes.
environment, you can scale the number of people you're able to help and to
Yes.
impact. And that makes the world better.
Yes.
Good therapy, good counseling, good conversations
Mhm.
make the world better. And that is a real contribution. And I think staying connected to that
Mhm.
for group practice owners, that if you have that bent, if that is a motivating factor, that's the challenge in the midst of all the details, the budget,
Right.
hiring and changing insurance issues, insurance problems, and having to troubleshoot all that. If you can stay connected to this, at the heart of this, we're trying to help more people. It's not just about making my bank account
Right.
bigger. and two, providing a context that's good for therapists. Therapists absolutely need care and support and community and
Mhm.
this idea that somehow we're supposed to have it all figured out. I mean, it's just
Right.
it's a pressure we all feel, and it's laughable. Like
Right.
it's like laughable that
Right.
too. So
And that's just making me think not everybody is suited to be a group practice owner. And a lot of us can go into this. I don't think I was inherently suited to be a group practice owner. I think the desire for relational connection with my staff and to be perceived as someone who was benevolent and caring really
yeah,
got in the way of the realities of the power dynamic that's in play. So I don't think that that's like an inherent comfortable place for me. And I think that everybody who goes into owning a practice assumes that they should be good at these things. Again, because just the pressure of what we're supposed to be in society. And it's
yes,
kind of funny to me that it keeps doing this in a therapy profession that is antithetical to like all of the pressures that like normal society has. And yet
yeah.
this is the way it's manifested with us.
Yes, I agree. Since I've been solo, there was one point with a client who was asking about my plans for the future. And I had said something along like, well, I'm not exactly sure. Do I want to just be a therapist on my own, or do I want to try to build something again? And she called me out. She's like, just a therapist? Yeah. Just
Aww.
what do you mean? Just like this somehow isn't enough. And I think it
Yeah.
was a blind spot where I think in my head I'd taken it. Well, it's like somehow
Yeah.
that's not, you need to be doing more, and you need to be growing you need to be entrepreneurial and growing this thing. And that was a number of years ago that was said to me. And I still thought that's like, oh yeah, I might have lost the plot a little bit about why I'm
Mm.
doing this work, and that we need good group practices, but also solo practitioners. That is every bit as sacred of work and is not lesser.
Right.
If you don't have a YouTube channel, or
Right.
that's not lesser. And in some ways, I think for a lot of the people I work with, the nature of the issues that they're sorting through that brings them into counseling, they don't want like flashy, too much of an expert persona actually undermines the trust.
Mhm.
It's like going to a gigantic mega church, that's like a shopping mall versus a little local parish where it's like, I
Mhm.
need this to be more of a refuge that's different from rest of the world.
Right.
There's a sacredness to that as well. And it's not, you're not failing. It's not
Right.
lesser. It has its place too.
Right. Well, and, talk about like, this idea of scaling and being able to help more people. I think that too can also be maybe a pathological thing because that was definitely why I started because I was like,
Yeah.
I have too many referrals I can't take care of. Like that's
Yes.
literally why it started. And I thought I
Yeah.
had to figure out a way to make sure that I could help all these people. And of course,
Yes.
by me hiring more people, and training and supervising or whatever, then I am an extension of that.
Yeah.
Again, sort of that like egoistic way of that made me not suited as much for the job.
Yeah. Yeah. Where it's like you need a bit of that. You need some of it to do it well. If you don't, you're going to struggle. But the flip side of that is, oh, I'm operating out of my own ego here and a messiah complex. And yeah, why not? What I do now, I mean, I tend to get more referrals than I can see. And I just send them to other therapists that are really good.
Right.
And I have a very high bar for who I refer to. I only refer to
Yep.
people I would go see myself or send a loved
Yep.
one. And there are other solutions to that issue. You can still help them. It just, yeah, as well. But also I think it is valid to say, well, to give the group practice, a run to. And really it helps. It helps. There's a lot of clinicians who would voice similar things, but they don't want to deal with the headaches of being on their own and having to market and accounting and
Mhm.
all that stuff too. So like it really provides a
Mhm.
service to therapists. They can.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think
Hmm.
so. Well, what advice would you give? Or maybe this is more for like your past self, right? If
Yeah.
you were able to beam back into the past before you started your group practice, what would you tell yourself?
I would probably try to calibrate my expectations for myself is this is going to feel like parenthood where you're going to be existing with a number of tensions. And if you don't feel the tension, you're probably not doing it right. I would probably go over that with myself. I think I would encourage myself to ask for help quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my blind spot was not so much that I need to help maximal people and to grow it. But I think my blind spot was just in my ability to be consistent with some of the just boring but important details of the work, and just that because it doesn't end. You don't build a healthy practice and you arrive at health. It's like, it's every day, and including weekends, it is like parenthood in that way, where it's like, you don't really get days off. And
right.
So, yeah, I would have encouraged myself to outsource some of that stuff rather than trying to do it all myself. And despite being a helper, my track record on asking for help quickly is nothing to be proud of. I tend to withdraw a little bit. And so, yeah, I would ask for help quicker. I would embrace being a student of how to be a practice owner, embrace this. I'm going to be a lifelong student of this. So I need to be learning. It's not just, well, I'm good at being a therapist. I know how to do this. I'm going to go hang a sign somewhere. There's these whole other skill sets. And there's a lot of great resources, yourself included, out there. But I would just embrace that mindset of like, okay, yeah, I'm going to need to be learning.
Yeah.
Same with parenthood. Just you're going to change a lot. Who you are, I'm assuming it was this way for you. Year 1 of practice ownership, by year 5,
yeah,
like you change along with the practice. Yeah. You're not the same. And that's how it is with parent. Who you are to a newborn baby is different to who you are as a parent to a 10-year-old. My oldest is 18, just graduated high school. And who I am as a dad is very, very different at this phase. And it is that. So yeah, embracing being a student, ask for help. Yeah, kind of always be reading or listening,
learning.
Podcasts. Yeah, just a steady diet of that. Never assume you have it all figured out. Never assume you've arrived.
Yeah. And never let your staff put you in that corner. Because I think sometimes I need to seem like I know what I'm doing because that's what my staff expects of me.
The staff I had, they were pretty intuitive, perceptive people. I don't think they ever had the illusion that I had it all figured out. I'm pretty sure, go out on a limb and say, my business partner was much more conscientious, much better about the detailed stuff. I think what they did know is that they were deeply cared about, and that they could tell that I believed in them and was really always trying to sell them on themselves. And they had that in me. But if they had some of this, so there wasn't a lot of posturing about that. Maybe there should have been a little more cosplay.
Well, I think you figured out what it is that you're supposed to be doing.
I think I learned much more about who I am and kind of who I'm not. And, where I'm at, I'm happy. Yeah, I think it fits me much better. And I think there are ways that the other people in my life get a better version of me than constantly dysregulated version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your experience and your stubborn hope with us.
Yeah, so good to talk with you. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Where can people find you, or do you not want them to find you?
Oh, I am difficult to find. By design. You can find me on LinkedIn, Psychology Today. Yeah, I keep a low-key profile online for now. So
that'll do.
Yeah, David Clinton. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for being here.
All right. Great to talk with you, Sarah. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the special Burnt Out Practice Owner series. If you want more information about today's guest, go to our website at www.headheartbiztherapy.com/podcast. Thanks to the Creative Imposter Studios for editing, and I'm your host, Sarah Bueno. Until next time, bye-bye.